Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of the Players NIL Industry Insider Podcast. My guest today is Rick Hess. Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, Rick, I did do quite a bit of homework, and quite honestly, it's 2 pages of notes just with your accolades and achievements and contributions to the world of education. But I will make note to our audience: you're the senior fellow at American Enterprise Institute. You're an author, a speaker, senior founding fellow, Public Education Foundation, Harvard Education Press editor, Education Next editor. So, given all of that background and given all that experience, I want to put it on hold and talk about you personally. Do you have a relationship with sports? Were you an athlete? Do you follow sports? What is your connection personally to the world of athletics?
Yeah, all the above. I played sports. I wasn't particularly good. I tended to play more soccer, growing up in Northern Virginia. I used to teach high school back once upon a time. I coached the girls' soccer team. I've got two boys today in elementary school, 7 and 10 years old. So they play hoops and soccer and they swim and they play tennis. So, and I'm a guy who, likes his fantasy football. So I'm probably kind of your classic dabbler,
Yeah,
more or
yeah.
less.
Well, you know, the NFL loves guys like you because you watch the game, you follow the game, and with fantasy, you're connected to multiple games. Rick, we want to talk about the role sports can, does, should play in education. You wrote a book called Getting Education Right. There's some political overtones to that about the way curriculum is written, but I want to say focus on sports. What role should sports play in childhood education?
You know, I think it's foundation. And not sports uniquely, but sports alongside things like arts and music is, I think part of raising kids to be healthy, motivated, engaged people and citizens is giving them things they're excited about. When you look at the data today on youth depression, on mental health issues, on social isolation, one of the problems is kids spend way too much time on devices. Average teens spend 7, 8 hours a day on their phone, gaming or social media. This is isolating. It takes them out of real relationships. One of the things sports can do so profoundly is it gives kids a way to play with others in a structured environment. It gives kids something to get invested in. It gives them something that they can practice, something that they can talk about with kids who look differently or live in a different part of town or otherwise have other interests. So for me, sport is crucial, not necessarily because there's any magic about a given sport, but because the act of being coached and making friends and practicing and failing and getting up and trying again is just so foundational to raising healthy kids.
Uh, that's a great answer. And it reminds me that recently I had a conversation with Paul Kakamo from Up to Us Sports. And Paul is an advocate for using sports as a vehicle for education and life skills. And his point to me was that, you know, oftentimes the coach spends more time with the students than the math teacher, right? And so it can have a profound influence. One of the challenges about youth sports is the rate in which kids grow, right? And I'm in the process of writing a book called 12-Year-Olds Win for All the Wrong Reasons, okay? And you can imagine, you know, the 12-year-old that, you know, is this tall and the 12-year-old that's this tall. And by age 16, it may even out, but at that age, it doesn't. So my point is that sports is a great vehicle, but it also can be humiliating for kids. It can be difficult. It can be a place that isn't safe for them in terms of bullying, things like that. We've gotten so specialized in sports. It's become such a big deal. If you turn on the television, there's just, you know, every live event is out there. What should parents be thinking about when they're youth, you know, let's call it K to 12 kids, perhaps the younger side of that, when they're participating in sports and you're a sports dad, so you've seen it all. Give me some words of wisdom for the parents. How should they be managing kids and expectations?
It's such a great question. And one of the problems is you mentioned at the beginning that it's easy to get into stuff like political curriculum. And so much of our national conversation today is politics. It's trying to figure out what side somebody's on. And that takes us in this hugely problematic direction. Because look, here's the deal. Um, we have pulled sports in the wrong direction in two ways at once. On the one hand, we've spent 20 years making it much less fun for kids to play together. We've created neighborhoods in a lot of the country where kids can't just hop on their bike and go find their friends. We're nervous about letting kids out for all kinds of reasons. We have plowed under parks. We have allowed, local rec leagues to atrophy. At school, we don't want kids to play dodgeball. And we want to make sure that there's 11 feet of pillows under any jungle gym they might climb. So we have done all of this stuff, which makes real life interaction trickier for kids to get into and less fun, which also drives a lot of kids who might be casual athletes to their phones because there they can be risky. They can die. They can shoot up bad guys. There's excitement. And on the other end, we've taken kids who are invested in sports, who are good at it, and we've increasingly created a culture of one sport specialists by, at early ages, with travel leagues and coaches who are demanding the kids are at practice 4 days, 5 days a week by middle school. And what I think it's done is it's made it much harder on parents to say, you know what, I want my kid to play football and soccer this fall. Maybe flag football, maybe football in order for everybody to be safe. You do need 4 days of practice, but flag football and soccer, or softball and soccer in this. And we've made that much harder for a lot of families to actually manage. And we've created this subtle dynamic where, oh, your kid didn't make travel. Well, no, I don't want my kid to do travel because I want to take my kids somewhere else for Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend. Like we value our family time. So I think what parents need to do is two things. As individuals, they need to kind of think about what are the kinds of experiences that are going to be fulfilling and developmentally sound and kind of healthy for my kid. So that means trying, failing, finding a coach who's firm but kind, and making sure that it's not becoming all consuming. The second thing parents need to do is they need to start saying to themselves, wait a minute, are we offering enough low key sports opportunities in our community? Can we band together and go talk to the county council? Can we talk to the middle school or high school principal? Can we go to the school board meeting and ask, what are we doing to rebuild intramurals after the pandemic? What are we doing to make sure that kids who maybe aren't very good, but are willing to give it a shot, feel like there's a place for them to run around and make friends and do something a whole lot healthier than twiddling their thumbs on somebody's cell phone?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. It's idealistic? Is it realistic? Right? And I've been on the sidelines of enough games and witnessed enough shenanigans from parents, that it's challenging because there's so much pressure from social media. There's so much pressure from the success stories that everyone gets measured by. And you touched on something that was really important. I think is really important, and that is the social climbing of the parents. Right, when they go to the country club, the cocktail party, when they're online walking into church, even, how's Rick doing? Where's Rick going to school? Right, that's like one of the big death questions is, what college is Rick going to? And when Rick is an athlete, what sport is he playing? Is he getting a scholarship? And parents find this need to live vicariously through their kids, which is just totally added pressure. But let's talk about social media for a second. It's a double-edged sword, right? It's created a smaller world. We're more connected. We have opportunities to learn. There's more information out there, but it also can be a trap. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, about 75 years ago, we introduced a really powerful piece of machinery in the lives of teenagers. Um, Used well, it could give you opportunity to meet new people, go cool places. Used poorly, it could maim you. It was the automobile. And what we said to ourselves is we don't think it's appropriate for kids to get behind the wheel of this until a certain age, 16. and we want to, it's hard for parents to know how do you go about teaching a kid to drive. So we institutionalized a set of routines among people who work with 16-year-olds every year. So for me, one, I think we need some, nor again, we need laws to frame this stuff, but I'm actually less interested in the laws than in the norms. I think we got to get a norm where parents are like, you know what? Social media is great for folks of a certain age who've learned how to use it appropriately. It's terrible for your typical 12 or 14-year-old. And
Mhm.
so I think we need to kind of set that expectation. The problem is if a kid's one of three kids in their grade who doesn't have a cell phone, then it's really hard for those parents to hold the line because the kids feel left out. So we need a norm where parents are getting their kids dumb phones because if they got to get picked up after practice, if routine changes, they got to be able to reach their parent.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean they need to be able to go on TikTok.
Yeah.
So that's I think a big part of it. Second is we need to get much more serious about folks who work with 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds all day, every day, taking responsibility to help them build those skills and teach it. And then the third thing is, the average teen, they get 240 plus messages a day.
Mm.
They can't concentrate on anything. They're being constantly bombarded. So I think again, it comes back to your point about parents. Parents have got to settle on norms. Tell you what, when you're old enough to have a phone, it comes in my room at 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. It's next to my bed. You don't look at it after a certain hour. You don't look at it, you don't look at it between X and X. You're not taking this to practice with you. So I think what we need is a set of routines where parents understand that kids have got to be kids, but we're creating frameworks that get kids immersed in the real world and that set clear guidelines on what it means like to use these things responsibly.
I hope we get there. I think those are great guidelines. And, again, I hope it's realistic, not just idealistic. Let's advance to the older kids. So, the players NIL, we teach name, image, and likeness in a life skills manner, okay? As an opportunity, we say that NIL should not be a 4-year thing. It could be a 40-year thing, right, if done properly. So let's talk about the role that NIL could play or is beginning to play in what I consider the right age to begin using guidelines is juniors in high school. That's when the recruiting process starts. It's when interaction with coaches start. It's probably about the right time that responsible use of social media can begin to fall in line with your guidelines. But so 2 years of high school and then your college experience, entrepreneurial skills, digital marketing skills, networking skills. These are the things that we profess. What are your thoughts about the potential role that NIL can play? Do you agree that it could be a positive?
We talk a lot in education today about the value of career and technical education, about teaching kids academic content in a setting that feels relevant
Mm.
and meaningful. Well, this is a great example of it. It's not for every kid, but
Mm.
just like every kid doesn't want to go into the health professions or doesn't necessarily, want to go into, industrial design, you could imagine kids getting really excited about this. But what I would want to see academically is folks figure out how do you build the instruction so it's not just here's how you cut the video, but that you're actually using that to start to analyze. All right, how do we think about the metrics on whether these things are performing? Which means we need some sense of computation. We need to kind of up our, what goes into an algorithm? How do we unpack that? I mean, that's some decent advanced math right there.
Mhm.
Communications. How do you write a script? What are the so I think that I could absolutely imagine under a CTE rubric this stuff working really well, so long as it was designed with here's a learning opportunity that has a lot of relevance for a kid's life, but we're going to make sure they're mastering academic skills along the way.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of a little bit off track. It's really just a personal curiosity for me. Is college enrollment up or down now with all what's going on? I see so many colleges are closing.
Yeah,
The cost of the high end schools is crazy.
it's
What's the
crazy.
enrollment look like?
Wake Forest, which is a great school, but it's not an Ivy League school, is $91,000 this year all in. CU Boulder, out of state, is $62,000 this year. So no, I mean, one reality is this stuff has been priced out for a lot of folks who don't have scholarships, which partly feeds that that competitiveness on the part of the parents that you're alluding to. Um, Colleges are closing because what's really happened is we're in the midst of a demographic decline. The number of Americans who are going to turn 18 uh, trends downward over the next 10 or 12 years.
Uh,
So we've seen about 10% or more of colleges shutter. It's not the name brands. It's the folks who took everybody, but had relatively narrow margins, and they're going out. So, I mean, your UTs and Ohio States aren't going anywhere, but there's going to be fewer colleges 10
yeah.
years from now than there are today, and they'll be enrolling fewer students. But the competition to get into the name brand colleges, which feel like they give you a fast pass to a good life, that's going to remain about as intense as ever.
Any thoughts on employers looking at kids that have a college degree versus don't?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the problems with so much of the distortion around higher ed, and it's bled over into sports in a big way, is that college was never intended to be a license to get a job. College is supposed to be a place where you go and develop as a human being, you learn things. But what happened back in the late 60s or early 70s in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Act is employers got nervous about relying on other skills to hire. A lot of the skills that sports develop, in fact, responsibility, relents. So what colleges could safely use was a piece of paper. So getting a degree became a good stand-in for whether or not you were qualified. Well, what we've now seen in the last 5, 10 years is people waking up to this. So you've seen governors, Republican and Democratic, like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Larry Hogan in Maryland, uncovering state jobs, saying you don't need a college diploma to get these jobs anymore. We're going to make it easier for you to apply and be judged on your merit. We've seen Fortune 500 companies doing this. There's a push with folks on both the left and the right supporting it, saying we've got to make it so that we're not locking people out of the job market just because they didn't get a piece of paper. The question should be their knowledge, their skills, their work ethic. And, to the extent that that starts to open up, other ways of building those skills, of demonstrating your chops, become more appealing. And one of those is the ability to wake up at 4 a.m. and go train and such becomes a really good proxy on whether I personally, one of the things I've always looked in hiring my 22-year-old RA types is I always want somebody who's a college athlete because, somebody who is a 3.8 in college, it's not that hard today. A 3.8 in college while you're waking up at 4 a.m. to go crew or, to play goalie on a women's lacrosse team. That tells me something about somebody's character.
Yeah. Well, and that's our point is that name, image, and likeness is an additional skill set that you can put next to, college athlete, whatever your job experience is, whether it's, in front of the camera, behind the camera, looking at those algorithms, understanding the math of social media and engagement rates, financial literacy, right? You manage a business, start a little, you know, t-shirt printing company or a social media influencer company, and you have to pay taxes, you have to file a tax return, all those types of things. So it's really exciting. Rick, we don't want to keep you all day long, but I find this fascinating because I am an educator at heart. Okay. And I do believe that there are a number of ways to educate people, but I happen to subscribe to and happen to have, expressed my feelings through the use of sports to use athletics to better your life. What are some words of wisdom you have for our young athletes out there that are fighting the parent pressure? They're fighting the social pressure, the social media, the community pressure. Maybe there's a coach that isn't so nice. Maybe there's a coach that didn't play you because of whatever reason. What's the long view of this opportunity, given the challenges of the world today? Give us some advice.
Yeah, oh man, those are such great questions. I think for me, what I try to talk about with my sons is at the end of the day, you're going to have this coach for a season, and if it's a good coach, we're going to be back. But if they're a bad coach, you got to last 3 months. The score of this game, whether or not the ref disallowed that goal or that hoop, how much does this matter in the scheme of things? There's only two things that really matter, I think, from the perspective of the young athlete. One, are they learning to do it right? Are they learning to try their best? to be respectful of their teammates, how to work as part of a team, how to take coaching. So for me, it always comes back to, okay, at the end of practice, at the end of a game, at the end of a season, are we learning to be the kind of person that I want them to be? And then the second thing is, are they having fun? And, you know, are they enjoying it? If they're not enjoying it, I'm not going to make them do it. There's plenty of stuff in life you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if they've got a coach or they've got a situation where it's not fun, let's be honest, let's communicate, let's be transparent with each other. And so for me, that's what I think, and if you're getting pressure because all your friends are playing travel and they're telling you got to play travel or you're not cool, I think, I think that there are kids, obviously, whose lives are going to be made or, it's make or break on if you can get that scholarship, if you can get into that private high school. And there's times when we have to make choices we might not want to make just because that's the reality we're dealt. But I think for lots of kids, it's about these subtle pressures. It's what they're seeing on social media. It's what they're hearing from their friends. And I think it's really valuable for kids to learn to stay grounded on. And the lessons I want them grounded on are they learning the right lessons here? And that's where parents are so crucial. It's hard for kids to do that themselves. And they should ask themselves, is this something I'm enjoying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should enjoy most of what we do, ideally. I mean, that's part of the beauty of a free country. And you sure as heck ought to be enjoying yourself playing sport.
Yeah, yeah. I had a good friend that told me one time the best parenting lesson that he could give me was, every ride home should be the same whether you win or lose. It's a good goal, right?
It's, that's right. Because, right, wins, wins and losses come and go. What matters is, did you get on the field where you were supposed to be?
Yeah,
Did you execute? Did you leave everything on the field?
yeah,
If they left everything on the field and they get their butts kicked, I'm good with that.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Great words of advice. Rick, if people want to follow you and learn more about, your role in this education process, where do we find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Rick Hess 99. They can find me at AEI at aei.org.
Okay, great. Rick, you've been a wonderful guest. I appreciate you, sharing your thoughts on this, from your perspective, which is from a high level education. We really enjoyed it. And thank you for being part of the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Great
Okay,
stuff.
have a great day.